Friends, another old-timey vegan cookbook has found me, so let's take another trip into the past of vintage vegetariana. Today we're going to be making recipes from Modern Vegetable Protein Cookery by Joan and Keith Kindig. This book was published in 1980 and it is all about vegetarian sources of protein, something that we still care and talk a lot about to this day. And hi, my name's Val and I made the recipe website Very Vegan Val. Now this is my second vintage vegan/vegetarian cookbook review or exploration. You can find the first one I did about the Book of Tofu at the top of the screen if you are interested. That being said, I do want to take this time at the beginning of this video to really express my gratitude for the people who made these recipes. If my memory from being a vegetarian in the 90s, as well as my review of the Great Tofu Cookbook stand true, I think it's possible that these vintage recipes don't quite measure up to modern taste standards. However, I am forever and always grateful to the early vegetarians who put in the creativity and sacrifice to develop meat-free cuisine into what we have today. So if you made it through the 80s as a vegetarian, thank you. Let's get started with our book of the day, Modern Vegetable Protein Cookery. Now this book mentions computers kind of a lot. It's right on the front cover. More than 200 vegetarian recipes tested by computer technology for the health benefits of low cholesterol, low fat cooking, plus all the protein you need. There are several more mentions of computers in this book. I guess Keith specifically was a mathematician and was an early adopter of computer technology, as was Joan, which I know because that's how they met. Now, this is absolutely a sidetrack, but did you know that they had computer matchmaking in the 1960s? Because I absolutely did not. And they did. Joan and Keith met in 1968 via a computer matchmaking service. Wild. I obviously had to look into that. Apparently it was invented by a guy named Bob Ross, who, as far as I know, did not paint happy little trees, but did paint happy little couples. Essentially, he would set individuals up with a fairly lengthy questionnaire that involved lots of issues regarding lifestyle and preferences. Some of these lifestyle and preferences questions I would say would be highly problematic today. And then they would use computer technology to calculate compatibility between different people who had filled out this questionnaire. Now, for anyone who has tried any sort of internet dating, it's not surprising that a lot of the time these matches were not horribly successful. I read that he even at one point set up a young lady with her older brother accidentally. I guess they had a lot in common. But they made at least one couple who stuck, because Joan and Keith Kindig remained married for many, many years, until Joan unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. My sincere condolences. But since computer technology clearly worked in their personal life, they took very similar technology and used to develop the Modern Vegetable Protein Cookery Cookbook. Now, if you're wondering why we need computer technology in cookbooks, it comes down to nutrition. To understand this book, you first need to understand complementary proteins. So proteins are made up of amino acids, and there are roughly 20 amino acids that we as humans need to build our bodies. Of those 20, a little over half of them we can synthesize ourselves. However, there are 9 amino acids that we need to ingest through our food in order to have all the amino acids we need. Now, most animal products contain all of those amino acids and are referred to as a complete protein. Plants, on the other hand, usually do not contain all of those proteins and instead contain a subset of them. The idea of complementary proteins became popular in the 1970s when Frances Moore Lappé wrote her book, Diet for a Small Planet. This book was incredibly important and brought together environmentalism and vegetarianism and the ability to feed the world using only vegetarian sources of protein. The idea behind this was that if you paired one food that, say, contained 5 of the essential amino acids you needed and another food that contained the other 4 and ate them together in a meal, you would have a complete protein. And a lot of this was kind of backed up by the way that people have eaten historically. Rice and beans often go together and they are a complete protein. However, it was not exactly tested scientifically to see if this is in fact how we needed to eat. So while the logic seems sound, and it was certainly well intended, the science did not actually back this up. You do not need to eat all your amino acids at one time in order to get a complete source of protein. Basically, if you have a reasonably diverse diet, you will get all the amino acids you need over time. And in later editions of her book, Frances Moore Lappé did go back and retract the need for eating complementary proteins. Interestingly, I do still sometimes see people pushing complementary proteins on social media. That and eating for your blood type, which is another wild one. Maybe we should talk about that another time. Just know that if you see these theories, they have been debunked, and you do not need to worry about pairing the right protein sources together. Unnecessary stress. However, they did not know that in the 1980s. And it was very much the idea of modern nutrition that drove this book. So the intention is that by combining technology with Joan's passion for cooking, they could create recipes that would provide complete nutrition sources for people who wanted to be vegetarian and wanted to live healthier lives. I will note that this is a vegetarian cookbook and not a vegan cookbook. It does make use of eggs and sometimes cheese. The quest behind complete proteins did actually drive me mildly crazy, because instead of making your lentil loaf from lentils, say, you'd make it from lentils and rice and millet. And so every recipe involves what just seems like an unnecessary amount of ingredients. And I didn't want to buy 20 things from the store for one recipe. So it took some time, but I went through them and I did find 3 recipes that I only had to buy a few ingredients for. And we're going to be making those today. Side note, I can see that if you were trying to be a vegetarian in the 80s, it would have been overwhelming. But here's the real question. Was it overwhelming and delicious? Today we're going to find out. After a lengthy introduction, let's step back and do some 80s cooking. For our first recipe, I'm going to be making this one. Soft chicken-style soy loaf in cans. They describe this as a steamed soy loaf. Looking at the ingredients, I think it's going to be kind of similar to a seitan. We're going to start off by grinding some ingredients. We're going to need a 1/4 cup of sunflower seeds and 1/2 cup of soy nuts, which I think are the same as these dry edamame. Separately, we also need to blend some soaked soybeans. Now they said 2.5 cups of soaked soybeans. I am not quite sure if they wanted 2.5 cups of soybeans soaked or 2.5 cups of soaked soybeans, because they expand a lot when they soak. I think I'm just going to take them at their word and do 2.5 cups now that they are soaked. I mean, that is already quite a lot, so I think that is what they meant. Now we're going to add a cup of water and blend. I don't have the best blender ever, but I am surprised how much trouble it had blending that much beans with that little water. Were blenders better in the 80s? Oops, I didn't read well. I was supposed to put other things in there too, so I'm going to do that now. 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. Next, they want me to use Vegisol, which as far as I can tell, does not exist anymore, and I was not able to find anything like it at the store. Essentially, Vegisol is a salt that also had seaweed and other things in it, so you could use less salt, like a low sodium salt with still some salt. So here's my compromise. I'm going to use Murals of Flavor from Penzeys, which is salt-free. I'm going to use some dried dulse, and then I'm going to add some salt. Mix that together, and that is going to be my version of Vegisol. So 2 tablespoons of that. Oh, 2 teaspoons. I was only supposed to do 2 teaspoons of that. Oh no, I've misread. It's okay. I'm going to add less of this soup seasoning that they suggest. Now they ask you to use a chicken-free chicken soup base. I was not able to find one today, so we're just going with this one, which is golden seasoning and broth. Now this we're going to blend. We've got our ground sunflower seeds and soy nuts, and we're adding 3/4 cup of whole wheat flour, mixing it together, and adding our ground soybeans. Let's mix this together. Next, they have you oil 2 cans. But I actually have a tool for that. It's called a hand press, and it's used for seitan making, so I think this is a better option. We'll fill it with our soy chicken. I don't think I want to put it under the pressure of my hand press. So I'm just gonna do a little bit of parchment paper and then put on the lid. It has you pressure cook it for 25 minutes. However, they were using half the amount of dough because they were splitting it into two. So I'm gonna pressure cook this for 35 minutes. Moving on to recipe number 2. We're going to be making this soy batter tamale loaf. So this is gonna be like a meatloaf, but tamale-ish. This time we need to grind some millet, 1/3 of a cup into a flour. We're also going to do another soy mixture. 1 cup of soaked soybeans, 3/4 cups of water, 1 teaspoon of our fake Vegisol, and 1 tablespoon of oil. We've got our soybean mixture, and we're going to add our ground millet, as well as 1/3 of a cup of cornmeal. We've got to prep our vegetables. 1 onion, chopped. I'm guessing they want to dice. 1 stalk of celery, chopped. Half a green bell pepper. This is a pretty small green bell pepper, and I like vegetables, so I'm just going to do the whole thing. Again, chopped. I'm curious why we went green bell pepper instead of red bell pepper or any bell pepper. I will also note that we are making the flavors of Mexico, and while we are including black olives, we are not including any chilies. All right, we're gonna wanna saute these vegetables ahead of time. Okay, it went against all my instincts, but it did say cook very briefly until just heated through. There was nothing about the onion softening or anything like that. Next, it has you transfer the vegetables into your batter. Stir in a can of drained tomatoes and some frozen corn, and we're gonna add our olives. Now it had you add 1/4 cup of black olives and 1/4 cup of green olives. However, for simplicity's sake, I'm just doing all black olives. Mix, mix, mix. It is colorful. We're gonna grease my old Pyrex, transfer in the batter, and then bake for about an hour. For our final recipe, we're gonna try making these oat and soy patties. Now, looking at this recipe, it actually looks the most like something I would make, so I'm excited to see how this will turn out. Start with oats and 1/2 cup of soy granules, which I just assumed meant TVP, but it occurs to me it might not. I think it does though. We're gonna go with it. We're also gonna add a teaspoon of dried sage. Mix together and set aside. I almost forgot, we're gonna need some more of our soy nuts ground, so we're gonna grind a cup of them. 1 stalk of celery, chopped. 1 small onion, chopped. 1 clove of garlic, minced. That is by far the most specific chopping term I've heard yet. Finally, we're going to chop this 1/4 cup of walnuts. Just a little bit. They are already pretty chopped up. Our water's come to the boil. We're gonna add onions, garlic, celery, 3 tablespoons of soy sauce, and 2 tablespoons of oil. Now we're gonna slowly add the oats and TVP. I'm not really sure why we have to add it slowly. Add the soy nuts and walnuts. It now says to let stand until all the liquid is absorbed, but we added so much stuff to this and there wasn't that much liquid. I would say it's already absorbed. I am gonna let it sit for a little bit though, just to sort of soak everything in, gel up a little bit. I also just saw that this calls for 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. I almost missed it. Nutritional yeast is one of my favorite things. Glad I didn't. Got some oil heating. All right, y'all, we've got our 80s vegetable proteins, and it's time to give them a taste. Starting off with our chicken-style soy loaf in a can. It did not come out of the can all in one piece. So I don't know if that was me or if that it's just a delicate recipe or who knows, but either way, we've got 3 pieces of soy loaf. Let's give it a taste. I would say that's not unpleasant. It's got a very delicate flavor, but a savory delicate flavor. And it's got a very soft texture. Because of that, I don't think I'd want this in a sandwich, as they recommended. I think that would be just too soft and not give you enough bite. I'm not really sure what you would want this in. It's not bad. it's also not good, you know? Like something that you cover it in sauce maybe. I'm not really sure. It could definitely be good just crumbled into a tomato sauce. That would be a good use for it for sure. I think it could be improved if you added some miso paste to your dough. Just more salt in general, I think would be good. This used whole wheat flour. I would have personally used vital wheat gluten if I did it. I don't think it was a very common ingredient in the 80s, although I think a lot of the things that this cookbook uses aren't common ingredients, so I don't know that that would have stopped them. But I think generally it could use more flavor, some more miso paste, some more salt, some more spices, but it is pleasant. If I had to rate this out of 10, I'd give it like a 5 or a 4. Next up, still hot from the oven, we have our soy tamale loaf. And I will say that when it was cooking, this smelled pretty good. No. It smelled good, but this is not it, man. There's not like very much masa flavor from the corn. It tastes much more like tofu than it does like tamales. A lot of like celery and bell pepper flavor, which I understand that like ingredients were different then, but like if you were to make this again, obviously you'd want to use like poblano peppers and maybe a chili pepper as well. The olives are just confusing. The texture is like very dense and moist and like just not very flavorful generally. If I were to make a version of this, I would definitely add things like cumin seeds, Mexican oregano, of course, switch out the bell peppers for poblano peppers. Get rid of those olives. Add some like hot sauce or some chili peppers or something there. And then just massively increase the amount of masa in this. I might actually do like a layer of masa and like a layer of soy protein underneath maybe. Almost like a pot pie, but tamale-ish. Not really sure. Or maybe I just make tamales. I'm not quite sure how I'm gonna salvage this one yet. There's a decent chance that my partner will be reminded of growing up in the 80s and want to eat it. I don't know, I'll let you know. Finally, we have our little mostly oat sausages. So I did have some trouble cooking these, and even now just handling them, they don't hold together horribly well. They are gluten-free, and a lot of the time when I make sausages, I use vital wheat gluten and I make a seitan-based sausage because seitan holds things together. However, I have made gluten-free sausages before using oats, and I think the key might be more oats proportionally. Let's give it a try. It is a little more crumbly than I would like, and I think not really as salty as I would like. I do recognize that this cookbook was trying to be healthy, probably limiting the amount of salt they put in things. The other thing that would really have helped is just more garlic, some chili flakes, some fennel seeds, just more spices. We do have the sage, which is nice, but I think having more spices in it would have given you more of that sausagey flavor you're looking for. The texture I think is pretty good, and because we fried it in oil, there is a good amount of that fattiness to it that you're looking for in a sausage. I like the texture being crisp on the top, and then in the middle being soft, but then you get sometimes like a little bit of walnut. You get different textures as you're eating it. I like that. I think I forgot to rate this tamale pie. I'm gonna rate it a 2. It is edible, but it's not anything that I enjoy. These sausages, on the other hand, I would give a solid 7 for a make-at-home gluten-free sausage option. If you are making this yourself, I really recommend adding more spices and more flavor and a little bit more salt. Other than that, solid recipe. Again, since we're not trying to get like complementary proteins here, I would probably take out the ground soy nuts, replace some of that with more oats. You could even grind some of the oats, get an oat flour to really help hold things together, because oats are really good at holding things together. And those are my notes. Thank you so much for joining me in this exploration of modern vegetable protein cookery. It's been a blast. Let me know in the comments what some of your favorite, or better yet, some of the worst vintage vegetarian dishes you've had are. I'd love to hear about them. Other than that, please like this video and subscribe. Oh, and also, when people start saying diversity is a bad word, and varying opinions or dissent are not allowed, and you just keep hearing the same things over and over and over again, and people agree with them, no matter how little they make sense, that's not strength. That's a cult.